Yeah, that's a difficult one. Do you know something? Before we did this part, I was kind of toying with earlier. So I'll be honest, okay? So I have some mental health issues myself. I have had for many years. I deal with it sometimes with medical care, sometimes with self medication or self help. I think being a leader, is it lonely? Yeah, there are limited people I can talk to, for example, about things. I've worked in organizations before where you do not want to show weakness because it'll be used against you. Thankfully, where I work now in PwC Academy, we don't have that. I have a very strong relationship with other partners within the academy and within the firm that I can talk to about various issues. And again, like I say, there is a mechanism within the firm that I can talk to anonymously about things. I'm also an ICAW chartered accountant, and ICAW themselves have a thing called CARBA, which is available to all of their members, which includes everything from financial advice through to mental health and sort of helping you with the day-to-day of life if it gets on top of you. So I'm very lucky in the fact that there are people that I can talk to. There is a structure around me in a formal way. And then, like I said, I mean, don't ever overstate the importance of having your mates, of having friends. And through the years, there are people that I've become incredibly close to who would be the first phone call in a crisis. There's a group of people, and again, it actually comes from the security industry. I know that if I phoned 3 or 4 people right now and I said, I need you to come to Dubai, they wouldn't ask why, they wouldn't say when, they'd just get on a plane. And I would do exactly the same for them. If the phone rang and they said, Gav, we need you to come back to the UK now, it'd be like, right, I'm on my way to the airport and things. And people make light of those kind of relationships, but actually that's what makes the world go round. That's what gives you that comfort. And it's not that I phone these guys or they phone me every day, or we have like endless conversations sitting on beanbags and talking about the world and things. But I just know that if I did need to, those people exist. And even down to the fact that I know that if whatever my wife is doing, if I phoned her and said, I need to talk to you, she'd just stop what she's doing and we would talk. And likewise, I would do the same. So I think having people around you in a formal way as a leader helps. But there's always that little bit of nervousness about whether you're showing weakness. But I would say it's not weakness, it's a strength that you're self-aware enough to know that something that's happening is affecting you in a way that is making you perhaps operate at 90% or 80% or 30% of your capability. I think that self-awareness is important, and asking for help is therefore critical. I think people don't necessarily understand mental health. I think, the ability to be incredibly happy whilst clinically depressed, and the ability to be euphoric inside but look unhappy, is something that I think society hasn't quite got a handle on yet. There was a great thing on social media that I think came from Norwich Football Club, where they showed 2 gentlemen watching football, and one looked like he was suffering mental health issues, and the other one didn't look like that. And then the punchline of the clip is eventually the guy who looked like he was suffering coming and folding a scarf and putting it on the seat of the guy who didn't look like he was suffering, saying, you never know who's struggling with their mental health. Yeah. And I think that's quite kind of important. And that's why I love the mental health, sort of guys that we've got here, the mental health first aiders. One of them has come and spoken to me a few weeks ago and just checked in on me and just said, just noticing a few things, are you okay? And I thought I was, but the fact that they took the time out to check that I'm okay was quite important. And I think, and again, this starts to get a little bit weird, I guess, but sometimes just checking in with somebody, I think, is quite important.
Yeah.
Even if you don't know what to say. And again, I was watching Jimmy Carr sort of in an interview. And we all know Jimmy Carr is a comedian. He's very funny, but he's also incredibly intellectual.
Yeah.
And the podcast he does, they blow my mind. There's so many learning and teaching moments within that. But he was talking about the issues that he had with the taxman. And we all know it, and he makes fun of it and jokes about it, but he handled it very, very well. He apologised and paid it back, kind of thing. But he talks about James Corden at that time. And again, this is his story, not mine. I'm not going to do it justice. But he says that when he was in it, when he was going through it, and he didn't think there was a way to turn, he said James Corden was doing a one-man show in New York, and during his interval, which was half an hour, He phoned Jimmy Carr and just said, "You right? You okay?" No agenda, no judgment, no reference. Just asked him, "You okay?" And Jimmy said, "Yeah." "Oh, okay, fine, whatever." And Jimmy's like, and James Corden apparently said something like, "You'll be okay. You'll be fine." And then he phoned him every day during his interval for a week or 10 days. Or I can't remember how long it was, but he phoned him every day. And Jimmy Carr makes that point and he says, "Look, even if you don't know what to say, sometimes just picking up the phone and going,
Yeah.
'Hello, mate. I don't know what to say. I don't know, but I'm here for you.'"
Yeah.
I think that's quite important. And I think we don't necessarily see that or do that enough in leadership. I think leaders are not prone to do that. And that's where you need your mates. And that's where you need your friends and things. And, social media doesn't help because we all put this outward image of everything's amazing and wonderful.
Yes.
And that can sometimes distract. But I think having your mates and having people around you that are willing to just go, "You okay? You sure? Everything all right? Do you want a coffee? Do you want a beer? Do you want to go for a walk? Do you want to do whatever?" I think is absolutely critical. And that keeps me going every so often when someone says that to me. But like most men, when sometimes people say to me, I'm like, "Yeah, everything's fine." Deep down, I'm thinking, actually, no, things are not fine. So it's a difficult one, but I think you need the formal structure. You need potentially, if you're having issues that could be chemically based, then yeah, you might need some chemical help from the medical world in terms of to just rebalance your brain chemistry or something along those lines. Sometimes you just need a pep talk with a friend. Sometimes you need to just have a laugh about something. Even if it's watching a TikTok of someone falling off a skateboard and it makes you laugh, sometimes you need to laugh. I'm good friends with a comedian in South Africa called Barry Hilton, who is making a name for himself on the corporate stage at the moment, talking about how you can use humour appropriately, of course, and he's a very clean comedian, but how you can bring humour into situations and how that helps mental health and all of these kind of things. And he's really making a name for himself in the corporate world at the moment, doing these talks to corporates about how you can use humour. And he himself has struggled a lot with mental health, and he's very open about it on social media. But yeah, and I learn a lot from listening to some of the things that he comes out with, as he's sort of looking at his career over the last 50, 60 years in comedy. And I think there's a lot to learn from people like that, who open up about their mental health challenges.
I'll have to give him a listen. Thank you for your honesty because
Yeah.
I honestly do think that it will make such a difference to other leaders listening. Because I imagine that role is very lonely and, highlighting that word weakness, mental health may be perceived as a weakness and in fact it's a strength. I'm pushing myself too hard. I'm working too hard at the detriment of my health. And then having the mental health first aiders within PwC, amazing. I just think it's incredible because, and even that friend that you say that might just go, "Look, are you okay?" Because sometimes other people see it in us before we see it ourselves. And catching someone before they go on that downward spiral is so important because maybe that person coming into the office to you and saying, "Look, Gavin, are you doing okay? It's just a few things I've noticed and I'm checking in." It helps you check in with yourself and say, "Well, wait, what's going on here? Am I feeling okay?" And get yourself back on track. How do you manage that? How do you, what's the next steps for you when something like that happens to help
Um,
yourself get on track, I guess, or not go down a downward spiral?
Look, sometimes it's go to the gym and lift things that are too heavy. Sometimes it's
Yeah.
go to the punch bag and beat seven bells out of it. Sometimes it's just getting some space and sitting on the beach and watching the ocean for an hour. Sometimes it's walking around the office. Sometimes it's going, right, I'm just going to go and have a laugh with someone for a bit and things. Sometimes it's picking up the phone to a friend. I don't think there is a formula for doing it. I think you try things and you learn from them.
Yeah.
I do believe that physical exercise can help mental health.
Yeah.
But I also sometimes think that it doesn't help. Sometimes if you're punching the punch bag because you've got something on your mind, sometimes the connection of the aggression and the feelings of mental issues or mental instability or whatever, they can sometimes get a little bit too connected and actually it can make things worse. But I think you have to try things, try different things. Sometimes you want to talk to people. Sometimes you absolutely can't imagine anything worse than talking to people. I think you deal with different things in different ways, and to be honest, I think you deal with the same situation at different times in different ways. Some people, it's like, for example, bereavement or what have you. I've in the last 12 months or so, last 18 months, I've lost some very dear friends, and also we've unfortunately lost my mother. And the way that I was affected by those bereavements was very different in each of the different circumstances. So there was no one way that I went, right, this has happened, I need to do X. This has happened, I need to do Y. It was actually, this has happened, I think I need to do this. Oh, no, that's making it worse. Stop, reverse, try a different path and things. And I don't think people give enough attention to self-awareness and to understanding the way they think and why they think that way. And I think if you can practice, if that's the right word, self-awareness, and try to develop an understanding of why you think the way you think, I think the path to get out of the doldrums or to get out of the hole you're in, it becomes a little bit clearer. I think if you're getting medical help and you're on antidepressants or whatever you're on, I think there needs to be a clinical need for medication. And I think some people perhaps fall into the trap of depending on the clinical treatment when they don't need it anymore or whatever, because it becomes a bit of a crutch. So I think we need to be better at having that awareness of, okay, I've had some medical help. I've been taking tablets or whatever for how long now. Let's see what happens if I come off those tablets. Obviously, in a safe and structured way. You don't just stop.
No.
You professionals.
Definitely not with antidepressants. No.
Yeah, but I think every so often just going, okay, do I still need this now? And if you don't, then phasing it out in the way that the doctor helps you, with a willingness to go, okay, maybe I tried to come off a little bit early, maybe I need to go back on, or a different dose or what have you. But I think that self-awareness of like, okay, actually, I don't want to rely on chemical help. Obviously, if you have a chemical imbalance somewhere that's causing problems, then yes, obviously medical treatment is probably the only way to do it. But I think sometimes changing lifestyle, changing people around you can also have a significant effect.
Completely.
That may mean you don't necessarily need the chemical crutches of medical help, or the chemical crutches from other sources, alcohol or what have you.
Absolutely.
I think sometimes changing lifestyle can make a significant effect.
Alcohol will make things worse.
Well, it can make things feel better in the short term, but it can make
shorter,
worse.
yeah. But then
And it can make things feel worse. Yeah,
every high, low. Just on that, when I suppose when you bring up medication there, and for anyone listening, I would always say there are times where people genuinely do need medication, and it's very important because it just brings you to that level where you're receptive to change. You're able to have self-awareness. Sometimes we're too high or we're too low. We're too anxious. What I mean by high is we're too anxious, we're too forward thinking, or we're too low to be able to logically think about how to get out of this situation. And that's beneficial. And that's, I guess, where, whatever, which I'm going to ask you about next, but for me, the way I would go about it is we would work with psychotherapy as you come off the medication, so that then you can navigate your life, and you work on them together. But I guess as a leader, when you said that, self-awareness is so important, and I'll even draw back to where you say, sometimes when you're feeling low, it depends. Some days it might be sitting on a beach listening to the ocean. Other days it could be lifting heavy weights. You have that awareness of what you need in that moment. And I never would advise someone on what's best for them, because we know our true selves of what works for us. Some people, for me, if you told me to sit and meditate, well, you would just make things worse, because everything would be going, unless it was a guided meditation. But that's not what works for me. Now, if I was to go to the ocean and listen to the waves, because I have that sound to listen to, and just slow down and not have the label of meditate, well, then I probably could slow down and rationalize what's going on. But it's different for each individual. So I guess for you personally, and maybe for others listening that may find this beneficial, how have you built your self-awareness? How would you say that in the moments where someone says, look, Gavin, are you doing okay? That you can work through that, you can navigate
Mm.
that and get yourself out the other side.
I think it's not difficult,
Mm-hmm.
but you have to face some facts about yourself that you actually might
Or
not really
exactly.
like that much, you know?
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll have been in a situation where I might have shouted at someone, or I might have got physical with someone, or I might have, um, obviously not in the office, just for the there may be a situation where I've snapped at someone. I've been in the middle of trying to get an email out, and it's the fourth interruption that I've had, and it's like, yes, what do you want? And it's like, okay, Gav. I just sometimes at the end of the day kind of just replay the day and go, how was I feeling when that happened, and were my feelings getting in the way of this? For example, you could have a situation where I was dealing with a member of staff. This isn't in this job. This is a previous job. I was dealing with a member of staff who was having quite a horrific time at home. They had two children, and one was being bullied quite excessively in a very, very, very bad way, and the other one was perhaps abusing some substances that they absolutely shouldn't have done. And people were kind of picking up in the workplace that this person wasn't really as focused, and they were dropping the ball and they were making mistakes, and the intention was, right, we need to sit them down, we need them to buck up their job, and they need to sort this out, otherwise they're not going to get promoted, or they're not going to get this. And I said to them, I said, shall we maybe just ask them first if there might be a reason why their performance is struggling? Are they distracted in some way? And I was like, "Oh, okay, we'll do that." And we sat the person down and we said, look, can't help but notice that maybe you're not really present as much as you used to be. You're not, and by present I don't mean turning up on time, but I mean just as in distracted. Is everything okay? And out it all came. And all of a sudden you then feel like a bit of a bad leader to go, okay, well, actually your performance is really bad. What we did is we started to go, okay, right, let's see what help we can get you. Let's see what we can do. Would it help to take a week off unpaid leave? And they're like, absolutely not, because I live hand to mouth. It's like, okay, fine, fine, fine. Would it help if we got someone to help talk to you? Can we, you know, is there anything we can do? And a couple of people sort of said, well, look, no, why don't, would it help if I did your grocery shopping for you, so you don't need to worry about that and things? Because they were living on their own and stuff with their kids. And we kind of came together and sort of worked out. But again, I kind of like that. This person's been going through this without saying anything for a while. You know, clearly we all noticed because of their work, but actually their home life was all over the place. So I think self-awareness is sometimes asking yourself in a different environment, am I being affected by something else? You
Yeah.
know, has someone posted something on social media that I didn't like, or made me feel uncomfortable or unsafe, or whatever? And is that making me feel differently in this environment? And maybe someone could be in a situation where they can't deal with it in the environment where it's happening, so they're transferring it to the environment where they something. So I mean, my father, bless him, he's in hospital at the moment. He's in his 80s. He's struggling a little bit. Had a broken ankle and things. He keeps on mentioning the word control. He's like, oh, are you in control? So I talk to him every day, and he'll say something. Oh, are you in control? I'm like, yeah, I feel like I'm in control. And it's really interesting because I'm interpreting that as him feeling that he's not in control. So he's transferring it onto me when I'm telling about what I've been doing. Is that, oh, are you in control? Yes, Dad, I'm in control. And I know it's because he doesn't feel in control because like he's in hospital and etc. etc. And I think we do transfer some things. So I think sometimes looking at the way things are manifesting themselves in one environment can actually indicate something that's possibly happening in another environment that they're unable to deal with. And I think leaders do that more than most. So
Mm.
let's be honest. If I wanted someone to go and get me a cup of coffee right now, I could open the door of the office I'm in and say, excuse me, can someone get me a cup of coffee? Someone will go and get me a cup. They'll think less of me. They may disrespect me a little bit. They may moan about it, but they'll go and get me a cup of coffee. I am in control. I have authority. I'm at home. I have three teenage kids. I have two dogs. We have three cats, and I have an incredibly busy wife who's like basically a professional sportswoman who eats what she eats and does what she does and exercises what she does, and she goes out at different times to do all of this kind of thing. I have zero authority in my house. If I tell the dog to sit, it walks off. If I tell the cat to go somewhere, it goes in the opposite direction. If I ask my kids to do something, it's 50-50 about whether they'll do it or whether I have to pay them to do it. So sometimes, if I'm feeling that I don't have any authority at home, it would be very easy for me to
Transfer that.
abuse my authority in the office. to
Yeah.
give myself back that feeling of self-worth and that I'm important in the world. I use the car journey to work and the car journey from work to get rid of those feelings if I have them,
Yeah.
whether it's positive or negative, and whichever way around it is. And I think that's quite important, that you are aware of what's happening in one environment and how it affects the other environment. And that's really what self-awareness is. It's
I,
like asking yourself, how do I feel about this is quite important.
yes, and if you don't mind me adding, and why?
Yes.
And I would always say why, because when we can understand the why, it kind of it prevents it, or at least it dilutes it the next time it happens. It's like, okay, this is reoccurring again, and you're quicker at resolving that each time, I feel. I thought it was brilliant what you said about your father there, and the control and transferring that. And I know within my own relationship, and when I work with families, there's often a line I say to them, and I say, look, sometimes you've got to ask yourself, who are you really arguing with here? Is it the person in front of you? Or is it something that happened that day from someone else? Or is it something that happened way back in time? What is really going on in this moment? And is this really the person that you want to be arguing with? Is it necessary? And so I think it's really, really important. And thank you for sharing that. And the other one I really wanted to commend you on was with that woman. I know you said that was before your time at PwC, but that could have been such a bigger weight on her if that had been approached in a different way. Whereas instead of focusing on the negative in that aspect, you could actually build her back or to a better version of herself by giving her that support within the working environment, because it must have been a very challenging place for her to be in. So really that really shows great leadership in you. So
I can't take credit for that. I might have asked the question, but the
yeah,
discussion was happening with a group of people, including some fantastic HR people who were saying, okay, let's not jump in, let's think about it. But one of the lessons that my father taught me, again, to give him that credit, is, and my father was a senior person kind of like throughout my 70 years later career. And he, you mentioned the word why. And he mentioned that all the time. He says, when someone tells you something, ask yourself, what are they telling me and why are they telling me? And sometimes when somebody tells you something, if you ask the right questions, you find actually what the real issue is. Now that works from a political management of working in an office. So, okay, why has that person just told me what that other person was doing? Okay, why have they done that? Is it because, it's appraisal time of year and they're trying to make themselves look good or whatever? Sometimes if you understand the motivation behind something. So when someone comes and tells you kind of, is it okay if I leave early tomorrow because I've got a medical appointment? It's a really difficult one because it's personal information. You shouldn't really be saying, so what's your medical appointment for? But maybe just saying, is there anything we can do to help? Is everything okay? They may then want to talk to you about it. Or they may not, in which case they can choose how to answer. But you've opened the door. It's up to them whether they walk through it or not. But yeah, we have no right to say, so you're going to the doctor. I'm not a doctor's receptionist. Sorry, so what's the problem? You have a rash? Where can I see the? That's not what I'm talking about here. What I'm saying is, if they say, I've got a medical appointment, so is everything okay? Do you need anything from us? Do you need time off, or can we help at all? Just opening the door, even if it's just a chink, to allow someone to go, actually, yeah, I'm really struggling with this, or it's always not for me, it's for one of my children who's going through this, or for my aging family who needs this, that, and the other. And so, well, look, would it help to maybe, why don't you work from home tomorrow so it's a little bit easier to do the logistics of getting them to where they want to be and things. And I think that opening that door for people to give an extra explanation is quite important. And all we did with that girl was just open the door for her to give an explanation. She could have chosen to say, no, everything's fine, I'm sorry, yeah, I'll put my ideas up and I'll come to work on time and I'll work harder, and we wouldn't have been any wiser. So the credit really is to her for opening up, not for us for asking the question. But I think asking the question is a good start.
It is a good start, and nobody else thought of it, so you've got to take that one at least. But it was obviously done in a way that she felt safe, because we're never going to give personal information if we don't feel in a safe environment to be able to do so. And so being able to create that safe space is not an easy task for people to do, because you could come in and say, well, is everything okay? You're not going to open up to that. You're not going to feel safe. Whereas when you create the environment, I guess you did within the previous job you were in, that created something for her that allowed her to express that vulnerable side to herself.
Yeah, and again, I was a leader, but I wasn't the only leader, and that was one of the
No.
places I worked where I worked for an exceptional leader who was very caring about
Yeah.
people, and that was the motivation and the encouragement from him in other areas then became the way that I started trying to do things, and that I carry through today, you know, and I try to do that today.
I guess that's probably similar to, I'm sorry to the lady, but to your sidekick in PwC. You were probably his sidekick back there. You know, it just shows that having someone there beside you really makes that difference as a leader. I'm going to give your team a little bit of advice here if they do listen for Eggshell Day. If they just do a little on your door and say, Gavin, are you okay? You don't seem yourself. Do you think Eggshell Day might ease away, or it might become a week if that happened?
I don't know. To be honest, let's see it. Let's see if they do it.
I'm
No, I
going
mean,
to put them all to try. I'm going to say 90% chance it'll be effective.
Yeah, quite possibly. I hope I don't have many eggshell days, but I do have my moments and things like that. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think I have the relationship with most of the people that work sort of directly with me. Certainly, that they know they can come talk to me, and they know they can put me straight on things. I have a kind of like a set of rules, which sounds horrible, but throughout my career, I've kind of developed this 10 rules that I like to try and follow, and I don't for a second say that I achieve it all the time. And one of those is that you have the obligation to dissent, but just do it appropriately. So calling me out in the middle of an office of where it's all open plan and there's 40 people is probably not the best way to do it. Saying, "Oh, Gav, can we have a word?" And then just coming into a meeting room and then just saying, "Look, you're snapping at people a bit. Say, is everything okay?" That would be fine. And I think that rule is quite important. That I do believe that I don't believe for a second I have all the best ideas. I don't believe that I have all even good ideas. I rely on people to say, and how about this, and how about this, and we can extend it and things, and develop their own thought process and their own ideas. So therefore, if I do say something that is stupid, then I expect them to push back. And I do sometimes stress test people a little bit when they've been here for like, I will deliberately say something stupid just to see whether or not they will actually kind of go, that's an interesting point. I hadn't thought of it like that. Have we thought about whether that might cause this or that? Just to see whether they'll I mean, I hate the phrase, but speak truth to power. I think a lot of people don't feel comfortable speaking truth to power,
Yeah.
but I want people who work for me to speak truth to power. I don't want people just agreeing with me because I have a job title. They should agree with me because they agree with me, or they should correct me so that I agree with them, and then we take the idea forward. So everyone has the obligation to dissent as long as it's done appropriately. But after we've made a decision, everybody is channeled on delivering that vision, that view, that strategy, that policy, that program, or whatever it is, really.
Wow. And you wouldn't feel sensitive if someone challenged that. That wouldn't, you know, like back to where you say, you know, maybe that social media post might have drawn something up in me, and it could impact me in other areas of life. Would you feel, or have there been any instances where if someone does challenge you, that you kind of feel a little bit of sensitive and maybe a bit defensive, or do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, I can think of an excellent example, which for various reasons I can't go into details on, but something had happened at home, and I was not in a good way. I hadn't processed it. I had a very big day. I had to come in. I would have worked from home, but I had to come into the office, and I kind of spoke to a couple of people and just said, "Look, today, just keep the nonsense away from my desk. I just need to do this, what I come in for." And I'd snapped at a couple of people earlier on, and yeah, there was an apology due, and I wasn't in a place that I can make it. And fair play that one of those people's line manager caught me in the office with that person and said, "Look, Gav, you know, you really upset this person because, you know," and I was like, "Look, seriously, not now." And I didn't handle it well because I snapped back at them and I just said, "Seriously, not now, because I will lose my shit." Basically, I was like, "No, I'm not in a position now for you to tell me what I'm doing wrong. I know I'm doing wrong, just not now. And I know I shouldn't have gone into the office on that day. I should have worked from home, or I should have taken the day off, whatever. But I had things that had to get done, and I just needed to do them. And I wasn't in the right state of mind to be told what I was doing wrong, because I knew I'd done it. I knew I'd snapped. I knew I was behaving like an idiot. I just wasn't ready to apologize. And if I'd have that conversation, I knew I would have had to apologize, and I wouldn't have apologized, and it would have escalated and made it worse. So I probably did make it worse in the short term. Obviously, the next day, I spoke to both of them, and I apologized profusely on email and sort of face to face and everything else. And they were both very forgiving. But I definitely damaged the relationship with those two people on that day. And, you know, we succeed or we learn. I've learned from that. Maybe next time, yeah, I do need to stay at home, or I need to get my laptop and go and work in another part of the building that's got the Wi-Fi that I need or the resources that I need. Yeah, and I made a mistake. We all make mistakes. And like I say, what you either succeed or you learn from it. But you know, and I felt quite bad for those two people involved, and it's taken a while. It took a while to rebuild the relationship because it was out of character. And one of them said to me, she said, "Gavin, it's just so out of character for you," and it was. And you know, I was wrong. But in that moment, that was the situation. And I think sometimes there are situations where you're like, okay, I'm not ready to talk about this right now.
Yeah.
I need to have the space to process this, then we can have a conversation about it. And I think that
Well,
again becomes that of
I
awareness.
think that's very important there, you know, within relationships and either relationship, you know, you actually did set a boundary, and I'll give you credit in that, where, look, everyone stay away today. And what actually happened in that moment is them individuals came into a space where you had set a boundary and you weren't open for communication. So whether that's our personal relationships or our work relationships, the boundary was set and it was crossed.
Yeah. But
Um,
in fairness to the crossing of the boundary, they weren't from my immediate team. So
they
they
weren't.
weren't in there,
Yeah.
just leave me alone today. So it
Yeah.
wasn't their fault. It was entirely my responsibility, the way
Within,
that
oh
I
no, and look,
did.
we can't commend them action, and I know that sometimes we go back to our childlike self when something has impacted us, and left us quite vulnerable, because it sounded like quite a vulnerable day for you, so it really must have been difficult to get through that. You know, even bringing yourself into the office in the first place, but highlighting that of you being so out of character, I think, you know, depending on what it is someone does, can be more forgiving, because it highlights that the mental strain that is going on for that person within that time. And yes, it is a learning curve, but it's also that you were in a very vulnerable state that day, and we've got to show compassion to that person too. Um, you know, so it's in that situation, and I guess every situation, so there's two people, and there was two people came into a room, noticed someone was behaving out of character. They're in a vulnerable position. There's something going on there. They might seem exterior that it's anger, but internally it's usually a lot more. Anger is an easier emotion to express than what's really going on. So, you know, I'm glad to say, or I'm glad to hear that relationship is mended somewhat, and I hope continues to. And I guess hopefully a good learning for all three of you within that. I don't want to keep you for too much longer. I was going to ask you a question, and it's about myself.
Okay.
It's if I was in your team, I was a new starter, and I came to you and I said, look, Gavin, I have autism and I have ADHD, which for me means that a lot of auditory sound, so an open plan office like that would be very difficult for me. But I could probably manage if I had noise cancelling headphones and a space I could go work with when I felt overwhelmed. Because for me, the way it works is I have a million ideas a minute, and then this need to complete them all. And I strangely enough, like to see things moving around me. It depends on where I am that day. But auditory, I find it, and sometimes very bright lights, a lot of lights can be very triggering. I work excellent from 5 a.m. in the morning, but afternoons, after 3, 4, unless I take a gap within the day, you know, I can burn out. I'm very sensory. Let me think, what else could I tell you about myself? But how would you say, I'm very sensitive to criticism. So rejection, sensitivity, dysphoria. So immediately I need someone, I'm someone who might need a little bit of a pat on the back and told I've I'm doing a good job before there might be some criticism on what I'm doing. Yeah, and I'd probably like yourself. It's not that I would get really angry, but I would need a bit of breathing space to hear that, and it would be how it's worded. Me and my husband do sometimes what he says to me. It's like, it's not what you're saying, it's how you're saying it that makes all the difference to the outcome. So, how would you say you would manage me within that team, or is that enough information for you briefly to say how we could work?
So there's elements of that which are something that I would have to deal with up front, and there are some of that which I would imagine that I would learn how to deal with over time.
Yeah.
So obviously the things like the noise cancelling headphones, working hours and things like that. I mean, and again, without waving the firm flag, PwC as a progressive employer as well, I mean, it recognizes that there are situations, circumstances around it. So we have a policy of flexible working. So you can determine your working hours with more flexibility. It's not you must be at your desk at 8 o'clock and you must be there until 5 o'clock. If you work better from 5 a.m., then fine, work from 5 a.m. There is a reality that sometimes, we're a client serving business, and if a client wants a phone call at 4:30, you may be working from 5 a.m. You may have to jump on a call later on in the afternoon, but obviously you have a certain amount of latitude to organise your day accordingly. But we're a client facing business, and if your client doesn't work from 5 in the morning until 8, then those 3 hours, we need to make sure that what you're doing during that is productive and valuable work. So there is a reality to that. Cool. However, things like noise cancelling headphones, your work environment, PwC has an open plan. Office partners don't have desks. We sit open plan, although we do have desks. I have my favourite desk that I always sit at. And we have quiet spaces that people can work in.
Wonderful.
And we allow people to work from home, kind of like if it suits the work that they're doing. Yeah. So adjustments can be made formally. From an informal basis, I would like to think that if you were working as part of the academy team, you would have had a conversation with myself or the other partners or the directors, what have you, and your needs will have been heard and adjustments will have been made accordingly. So it may well be that we give you a career coach who is more prone to handling that kind of situation better than somebody else, for example. Yeah. So we may say, okay, you have some issues that require someone with a bit higher level skill set of leading other people. Therefore, we will put you with a more experienced career coach rather than a career coach who maybe is relatively new to managing people. So we would make those adjustments to try and suit. But ultimately, it comes down to communication and asking you, are you okay? Is there anything else that we can do within what is reasonable? It's like one of my team was saying the other day how kind of their wrists were aching and stuff because we work on laptops, not larger keyboards. And so we went and got her a bigger keyboard. And we got her a support. We didn't go through all the channels and procurement. We just went down to Daiso and bought one, and things like that, just to kind of like help her out a little bit. Because at the end of the day, I'm cynical. I need people to perform at their best consistently. Yeah. If I can go and buy them a footrest or I can buy them a wrist rest that enables them to be more productive, of course I'm going to do it from a commercial point of view, but also just from I don't want people to come to work and hate being there or feel uncomfortable or be desperate to go. I want people to enjoy the environment in which we work. I don't always get it right. Socializing with staff and things like that, I have some different views to other people on when it's appropriate, when it's not appropriate. So I think we live and we learn, and I think it's part of the process. And one thing that I do, which again is something my father taught me, much as I hate to admit it, whenever I'm doing anyone's performance review, there's always one question I always ask them right at the end, which is there anything else that I should be doing better to support you? Yes, it's their performance evaluation, it's giving feedback, it's going through all of their objectives and things, but I always make sure I always ask that question, just in case I'm missing something, just to give them, again, the door is open for you to say what else you need from me. If you don't choose to go through it, I can't force you. No. And ultimately, the ultimate decision of whether you feel that I'm a good leader or not is whether you stay or whether you leave and get another job. That's certainly one of the factors. People leave jobs because of bad leadership all the time. People are attracted to jobs because of good leaders all the time. It's not
Yeah,
always about salary and benefits. They're really intangible.
absolutely. I think leadership plays a bigger role than that. You know, we want to be happy, and once our staff are happy, and they want to keep coming to work, and it's back to that work-life balance we were talking about earlier. And you know, money can bring you so far, but joy on in the work you're doing is way more important.
Exactly.
With the overall aspect. And we probably end up spending that money more that we may make where we're unhappy to try and make ourselves
Yeah,
happy. So it balances itself out. Um,
exactly.
Gavin, I have taken so much of your time
That's
today,
okay.
but I've loved every minute. I
Perfect.
really, really appreciate it, and I appreciate you, and I appreciate all you guys are doing at PwC. It's just wonderful to hear the flexibility that's there. For people with mental health issues, for the neurodivergent community, and building that awareness and understanding and normalizing. And I guess just for every human, you know, creating that human environment that we are all just human, and you being able to demonstrate the flaws within yourself and that want to continue to learn. I think that's so powerful. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Hopefully, I haven't said anything that results in me no longer being employed, but
I don't think
well, none of my staff talking to me and my wife divorcing me and my kids disowning me. Hopefully, that
I think
hasn't
you'll just
happened.
get a couple of knock knocks. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'll just be going, everywhere I go, I hear the
Maybe
sound of knocking, and it's weird.
they should
But
do that at home as well. Your wife and your kids. And you're more than just a bank or a wallet for them, believe me. You'll see that and hear that in later years. They're just at
Yeah, I'm sure.
a tricky age. From a daughter who probably was perceived the same. That's not the way I felt about my parents, and certainly they probably hear it a lot more today than they would have then. But you're definitely worth a lot more to them than just the
Good.
wallet. So don't forget them.
Well, that's very kind of you, but maybe you should speak to them first.
I hope they listen.
We all live in hope.
And tell them to reach out anytime. Honestly, Gavin, I really do truly appreciate you and your time
My
today.
pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.